Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast, one-stop shop for everyone feeling stuck in their career and who are looking to identify, change, and succeed at their new fulfilling work. I'm your host, Dilma Oseita. Let's go. Hi all, how are you doing? And coming back after a short summer break, probably you've noticed there were a few episodes missing. I just took some time off. It was absolutely divine. I was in nature a lot, by the beach, in the forest. I was road tripping with my loved ones. I think I mentioned that before. We were visiting some old manors and palaces. Just recharging my batteries and enjoying life, you guys. It was fantastic. How has your summer been? Or winter, if you're tuning in from Australia? Either way, I hope that you had time to unplug, rest it out, and get inspired. I hope that you're also coming back eager to either start or continue with your career change journey. I've noticed that there have been more and more people finally committing to change, well, at least in my orbit. And I could not be more proud of all of you. The world needs your light, it needs your gifts, and it needs your medicine right now, probably more than ever before, given everything that is going on right now. I consciously and very deliberately withhold my opinions in regards to what's happening globally, not because I don't have a point of view. You'll probably notice that I'm a pretty opinionated little P, but because I don't believe the issues will be solved by us merely talking about it over and over and over again and passing judgment. I want to contribute to the conversation of change, empowerment, each and every one of you, because you are the change. And I deeply believe that all of us have a responsibility to be the change that we want to see more of in the world. So I'm hopeful for the future and I'm excited. And if you're not excited, feel free to borrow my excitement. I have enough to spare and then some probably. The way I go about choosing topics for the podcast is by simply observing what's happening in the ether around me, in particular with career changers and those seeking to change their lives and careers around by introducing more meaningful and purposeful activities. I look for resurfacing and repeating patterns. I sit with them and then I bring it back to you all here by introducing the topic and then also offering a few reframes or different perspectives on it. And where possible, I will also share a few solutions with you, what I've seen work, and first and foremost on myself. As you guys know, I'm the first one to try and implement every approach, any technique, before I share them with my clients and all of you here. And what I have been observing lately is the record high levels of self-sabotaging behaviors and resistance to change. If we look at it globally, I guess it makes sense, but let's look at it at an individual level. Now, the aspect is not new. The topic is not new. It's essentially an integral part of the evolutionary survival mechanism in which our brain still partly operates in. And I'd even go to say as far as this was probably something human species had been dealing with for eons at this point. I also shared, by the way, a 2-part post about this on Instagram. So if you haven't checked it out, please do, because this episode will be an extension of the points that I shared there. Now, as you've noticed, I included self-sabotage in the title of the episode, kind of cheating a little bit because I wanted to catch your attention, as I've heard people refer to it like that and use this word a lot. However, I have to come clean with you here. I do not believe in self-sabotage. I do not think it exists. What I do think is happening, though, is a lack of understanding of our cognitive processes and the psychology of change. And before your eyes glaze over here and you lose interest in what I will share next, I'd really like to prompt you to stay with me till the end of the episode. I understand you might not be geeking out in psychology and self-development as much as I do. However, this is the point. Really comprehending this process, even if on a very high level, will help you process and recognize what happens to you when you decide to procrastinate, skip on a task, when you engage in avoidant behaviors, and how to turn it around so you'd never have to feel trapped in the same response patterns of you getting stuck, not getting things done, feeding yourself with empty promises, and hoping that tomorrow will be different. We've all been there, we've all experienced it. When you find yourself in these situations, your brain may also tell you, you know what? You know what you need in your life? You need another strategy. You need another tool. You need the how. We're all guilty of getting trapped by the how bait. But how bait is a greedy monster and it will never be satisfied. You try one strategy, it doesn't work, you get upset, you drop it, you try another thing, you point fingers, you get upset, accuse, blame, complain, and can engage in this cycle for all of your life, refusing to stop and ask yourself, how much am I playing the part in this Groundhog Day scenario? Awareness is key. And if you've been listening to my podcast for some time now, you probably know that I re-emphasize that over and over again. Awareness and then acceptance, that's our medicine. And that's why I want to briefly explain to you today what happens to you in those moments. And hopefully that will also allow you to offer yourself some more self-compassion, because it's not you who's lazy, who doesn't have enough willpower, who's a failure, whatever else you're telling yourself. These are ancient mechanisms that are operating in our ancient brains. And we haven't been long enough on this planet, believe it or not, from the evolutionary perspective, to have outgrown those primal response antics. Here's how the story usually unfolds. Let me illustrate this for you, and let me know if you can relate to this example. By the way, what I will be sharing today is not just applicable to career change, but also you trying to introduce anything new into your set routine, be it a new exercise protocol, be it new level of consistency in studying, new eating habits, anything really that requires a change in status quo, okay? So basically, whenever we set out to do something different and uncertain, whenever we commit to a new challenge or get excited to start working on this most authentic career switch, when the initial hype dies down, you can rest assured that the first to knock on your door without a fail will be what in behavioral psychology we refer to as resistance. Resistance is punctual, it's convincing, and it shows up like clockwork almost every single time. This then, in turn, may really leave us feeling baffled. How is it that we consciously know we want to change something? We know that we need to get healthier, we know we need to quit this job, yet when the time comes to actually start taking action, we freeze. Or we procrastinate, or we get busy with trivial stuff that keeps us occupied, but does not bring us anywhere closer to our goal, even by a stretch. I often hear people refer to it as almost having two parts within them that are constantly fighting each other, this inner conflict. There's a part that is determined to change, and there's the other part, sabotaging the efforts. And actually, that is not far off the truth. The moment we commit to change, we instantly challenge our natural evolutionary response system, where our brain and the nervous system will insist on upholding the status quo at all costs in order to keep us safe. It all makes perfect sense when we analyze the way our brain functions, because the majority of intentional conscious decisions are made in the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. The good news is that this is a part of the brain that is aware, that notices the patterns, that can create new plans and commitments, and this is where real change is essentially born. Here's the challenge. We only spend in the prefrontal cortex around 5 to 10% of our conscious waking time during the day. The rest 90 to 95% of the time is spent in the subconscious autopilot, This is where the old patterns and habits that no longer serve us reside. And to our disadvantage, because the installed automatic patterns feel the most predictable and familiar, if we are not aware and we're not vigilant, the brain will tend to favor these familiar, old, limiting patterns, even if they don't serve us anymore. Because the main job of the brain is to keep us safe. Again, it's all about safety. This code to survive is so deeply ingrained that the brain will be alert every single time it perceives something as new, as uncertain, and as unusual. It will essentially red flag all over it and will get to work to rationalize and suggest to us all kinds of subjective but real sounding reasonings as to why this is not a good idea, right? Whenever you suggest something, no. It's a reflexive reaction. There's not a lot of thought and introspection going into this automatic response. That's the main message I'm trying to share with you here. A lot of the time, we won't even register these thoughts, and this internal resistance to the change of routine will manifest in many different familiar shapes and forms. And I will share a couple of examples here. You may have one that you prefer, maybe you relate to all of them. So that resistance may look like procrastination, wasting time, avoiding to do things, making excuses as to why you can't do it, delaying the action, seeking for instant gratification, using perfectionism to either delay the start or the finish of our projects. I want to, when I'm talking, I almost sometimes wish I could underline the words. Perfectionism. I hear it so much from overachiever clients who come in and they say, listen, I just struggle with perfectionism. This is just the shadow side of resistance. It also may look like you constantly feeling stuck in your circumstances and therefore feeling helpless to get out of there. Low motivation. It may look like also analysis paralysis and overthinking. Giving up before you even properly start. Feeling tired or sleepy every time you sit down to do the work that you were intending to do, that you had planned in your prefrontal cortex, but when you sit down to do the work, you're like, oh gosh, I'm so tired, I need a nap. I know this is, I'm talking about this because that happens to me where I sit down and be like, oh man, like Vilma, you need to rest, girl. You've been working so hard today. Or it could look like filling time with a lot of pointless action. That is doing everything but that one thing that you need to do to move yourself closer to your goal or whatever it is that you're going. And there could be many other creative and even unconscious ways in which our ego defensiveness will kick in. So often the reason why we'll want to quit before properly giving something a go, especially in career change, is because of this internal fight between wanting to do something different and yet feeling like we're completely powerless to change anything. We will then find ourselves in the state of this cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is just a fancy term that basically means that we are experiencing mental discomfort from holding several conflicting wants and beliefs that in turn cause us to feel unease, discomfort. And if we get stuck in this pattern, in the long term, it will even cause us suffering. For instance, you decide you want to look for another job, right? That's a common one. If you're listening to this podcast, probably you're interested in career change. I hope so. Definitely not from my voice that you're listening to this podcast. So you know that you want another job, right? But you do not know entirely where to start. All you know is that where you're at now, the current job feels dreadful and you cannot stand thinking, even the thought that you'll have to stay there for another month or year or so on and so forth. So what you do, you open up online, job ads portal and you start scrolling through to see what's available. You start doing your research. And probably before you even finish reading the first, maybe the second job description, you will find yourself clicking away thinking, who am I trying to fool here? I will never be able to get a job like that. I don't have what it takes. I don't have this, I don't have experience, education, who will take me, blah, 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 fill in the gap. Mind you, this is not objectively true, what you're telling yourself, because you don't know that you won't make it without properly investigating and applying for the position. But your mind will shut this opportunity off selfishly. Because remember, anything that's new will not naturally be registered as safe by your brain. It's new, that means it's unfamiliar, that means you're not safe. And because you might not have the awareness and the tools to walk yourself through the process of change, you will shut all the efforts off and you will stay stuck in that cycle. What's even worse, you will then make it mean something about yourself. That's a very common mechanism. You may tell yourself you're not worthy, that you failed on all of these instances before. So this one is going to be no different. Remember, brain is operating on historical data. It wants to talk about probability based on what has happened in the past. It is not trained to think in possibility, what is possible for you. So then it just tells you, listen, you should not even try because you're lazy, not smart enough, etc., whatever is your limiting belief poison of choice. There are several. Which then in turn, see, it's all linked, it's kind of like a chain reaction. Then in turn, it will leave you even more demotivated to take intentional action. And then your action will be different based on your default nervous system response: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So for instance, if your default response is fight, you will then get angry at either the system for, say, setting an unrealistic list of requirements for the candidates, or angry at yourself for wasting time looking for something else because it never works anyway, etc., etc. So you will be responding based on what that natural reaction is. I know for me it's fight. So I usually get angry. I either internalize anger at myself or I'll get angry at the whole world. It usually doesn't last for too long, but that's the red flag. That's the stop sign for me to pause and investigate what is happening. I'm not responding from my adult self. I'm responding from a complex, from a wound. Something is triggering my nervous system. So how do we start changing that vicious circle, right? That's what we want to know. So the first step is to understand and reframe this inevitable resistance. What I've noticed we spent a lot of time doing is resisting the resistance. As funny as that sounds, that happens a lot. We are getting angry and judgmental, then we find ourselves in resistance. But here's the thing. Resisting resistance is a little bit like resisting, for instance, that the earth spins around its axis. It just does. It's a fact. In the same way, resistance is an inherent characteristic of change. Feeling resistance and using some of the coping mechanisms that I shared earlier with you to relieve it, like procrastination, doesn't mean that you're lazy or that something has gone wrong. Resistance is a natural, I would even say a healthy reaction of a healthy brain to you trying to raise the stakes. It means that you are on the verge of massive growth. You're about to go places you've not gone before. Period. Nothing has gone wrong. And so we start with reframing resistance. Not only is it healthy, it actually is your friend because it will resurface and help you see the whole bouquet of core limiting beliefs that you will need to address in order to step into that new elevated version of yourself. Let's not resist resistance. Let's expect it. Let's prepare for it. Let's learn how to honor it and work with it. Resistance is how we've been trained to protect ourselves over the thousands of years, and it's not inherently wrong or right. And it doesn't mean you have a vicious internal saboteur. Therefore, you don't have to fear or judge resistance and all those different masks and clothes that it chooses to wear. It's to be expected. Simple as that. No drama. This is how we normalize the state. We understand that it serves a purpose and we learn to accept and expect for it. So that's the first step. Secondly, we need to understand that resistance will kick in response to us threatening our as is, whatever that default status quo may be. Questioning status quo and conventional structures is how change is born. We know that. So in order to support our system throughout the change, we should try to soothe our nervous system by introducing some other alternative ways to create a sense of safety, structure, and familiarity while undergoing a period of change where that will be threatened and lost. For example, if you're someone who has a heightened sense of anxiety and you know you get overwhelmed easily, make sure the change you introduce is slow and consistent so you don't get overwhelmed. This is where my advice about not quitting your job straight away, not going cold turkey without having some clarity on what comes next. Then gradual shift is your answer. If you feel like you get tired easily, make sure you plan for non-negotiable guilt-free time to rest. Don't work late in the evenings. Take at least one day off during your weekends, completely off, or plan the activities that rejuvenate you and relax you. Be kind to yourself, support yourself. Have at least some sort of basic structure to your week and to your working day. Even the little things help, like for instance, having meals at the same time of the day. Something that small can introduce more certainty and safety. Looking after yourself during this period of change is a little bit like looking after a kid, where routine is king. You've noticed how important it is for kids to have the same routine when they brush the teeth, when they have the dinner, when they get up, how they go to kindergarten or school is essential for their development. So get to know your needs and ask yourself what gives you a sense of safety and structure in your life. Again, an example from my life that I can give you, I know for me, it's my morning and evening routines. The morning routine is where I reset my inner compass, physically, mentally, emotionally, and energetically. I've spoken, I think, about my morning routine before. And in the evening, it's time for me to unwind, process, tidy up, close all the open mental tabs and get ready for rest, right? We always laugh that in our browsers, we have a gazillion of open tabs. The same goes for my mental processes. I sort of check where I'm at the end of the day, if I need to journal, if I need to do some yoga, whatever it is that I need to do to help me close those tabs or at least pause them for now so I could rest better. And the rest of my life can be in motion, but as long as I have these two sacred check-in points throughout the course of the day, I know I'm capable of handling moving parts and handling change. What does that look like for you? Also, by the way, to add to this, another question you can ask yourself is, how can I make it simple? It's a simple question, but we love to overcomplicate things sometimes. How can you make committing to change a complete non-brainer for you and remove potential obstacles out of the way? So what this could look like is, say, having a supportive person that you can go to who's aware of your change, and you can speak to them whenever you feel like your commitment is slipping away and you need to renew your motivation. Or, for instance, you can plan and prepare for what might get in the way. Resistance usually tends to increase if we face some sort of unexpected obstacles. For instance, if you're trying to exercise in the morning, so probably you've heard of this advice, and it's there for a reason. Targeting our brain function and the way it works is, if you know that you want to work out in the morning, say before work, lay out your outfit and everything you'll need for the morning in the evening. Or if you're planning to do some writing in the morning, for instance, you're trying to, pick up a writing career. So leave your workspace tidy and clean and inviting in the evening, because if you get up and see a messy workspace, you may be like, well, I can't write now. I first need to clean up and tidy up. And then the procrastination mechanism will kick in and you'll find yourself cleaning your desk, and then you'll move into the wardrobe and the time is over. You haven't written anything. Right? It's kind of a slippery slope. So pre-think and plan for it. And finally, the third step is kind of like we tackle resistance freeway, the way I like to call it. The third step is arguably the most important one. I invite you to practice pause. When you feel resistance, by the way, I think if there was a sound that could summarize what resistance feels like, at least for me, it would be like, don't feel like it. By the way, you should let me know. If there was a sound that you had to kind of give to resistance, what would that look like? So when we feel that resistance, instead of instantly acting it out by going to our default mechanism, as our system does not like to stay in cognitive dissonance for too long, remember, so we will usually be prompted to do something to get away from this feeling of uneasiness, because it's not easy to be in uneasiness. So in that moment, I invite you to somehow stop yourself and resist this urge to do. Stand still for a moment, even if it's just a blink of an eye. Recognize the resistance is happening and remind yourself it's a natural reaction. Acknowledge, honor it. Remind yourself it's not you sabotaging yourself. It's not you failing again or being lazy. It's a part of you that wants you safe and has a very limited vision. It doesn't know that you expanding and growing and continuing with your change can also eventually feel safe. So it's your job to show to that part within you that, eventually it will feel safe, and whatever change you're introducing will eventually become the new status quo that it could rest in. And by doing this, we're learning to feel the resistance, say hi to the resistance, wave hello, and continue with the action and task you have committed to anyway. You can feel the resistance and still do the action. Still continue with whatever it is that you planned. Still find it in you not to give in to procrastination and all the other stuckness exercises that we engage in. So not becoming one with resistance, creating enough space to notice and recognize what's happening here, and reminding yourself that nothing has gone wrong. That little bit of pause can make the whole difference between us showing up for ourselves in a committed, respectful manner versus giving in to resistant behaviors. That's when we open up the door to possibility. That's how we create new neural pathways and start installing new habits and new ways of being and acting. So at first, it's an arduous, consistent process of making a decision to feel the resistance and not make it mean anything about us or our future. It's a progressive practice, so the more we do it, the easier it becomes, like training a muscle. By the way, a bit of a disclaimer, which I think is important to share. I talk here of overcoming self-sabotage and resistance in the context of change in a general manner. That's when resistance is a natural response to you wanting to move the needle and go places you have not been before. It cannot, however, be used as a blanket statement. So there's just, warning of caution. There will be instances where the resistance you feel may in fact be your inner guidance, your sacred wisdom offering you direction. And in that case, I'm not telling you that you should tackle what will feel like resistance in the method that I'm sharing here today. And how can you tell between the two? Well, that's a very individual inner navigation system that we should learn how to differentiate. Usually the difference between the two will be tangible yet subtle. But that difference will vary from individual to individual. Therefore, it's very hard for me to summarize you and give you like a list of criteria to tell apart the two. Where is just your natural part of the resistance and where is your intuition and internal guidance? I can use myself as an example again. So my resistance to change feels usually rigid. It sounds, acts, feels like, if I had to describe like a rebelling teenager, if I question it, notice it, try to engage with it, it usually disappears. It has no legs, so to speak. Now my guidance feels softer, it's more quiet, it's more loving, and also it's open to conversation. It's more dynamic, it's less rigid, it has energy behind it. So there you have it. The 3 steps I use myself and the 3 steps I use to navigate my clients through what I found to work. You first understand the internal mechanism of change, you normalize it, You create alternative ways to introduce more safety and structure, and then you practice the pause. And the reason why I'm both fascinated and deeply interested in this topic is because in my work with career changers who undergo a massive identity and circumstance shift, understanding where resistance comes from and learning how to engage with it may be the difference between a successful change and them giving into the pull and running back to the safety without completing the transition. And that is exactly why I'm sharing this with you today. It's a subtle but incredibly potent mind shift that has the potential to change the way you relate to the world and the results that you create. Ironically, since we're talking about resistance, this is also the work we're often resisting to do because it can feel ambiguous at times. It's intuitive, it requires stillness. That's why we get caught in the how bait, into believing there's a magic solution or one miraculous strategy. Yet this is the work that carries the key to unlock your potential. There you have it, free of charge. Implement it. My job is not to sell you on another strategy. Now, don't get me wrong, my holistic career change process works. I will be happy to talk about it all day, every day. You wake me up in the middle of the night, I'll walk you through it. I love it. I know it has the potential to transform someone's lives. But you know why it works? It's because it takes into account everything that I shared with you today. My program doesn't sell you a tool or a magic bullet. My program works because it sells you on you. And you, my friend, are magical, you're resourceful, powerful, determined, you're soft, and you're strong, and you're resilient, you're visionary. And you can never go wrong when you deeply buy into your own inherent value. It's fail-proof. Have an amazing week. Thank you for joining me today. If you're finding this content valuable, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave a review. And if you'd like to take this work further, schedule your first call so we could mastermind together on how to get your career and life back on track. Can't wait to meet you.